Got a projection.
I have a projection. It can be turned into 767. That will be the invitation song. Coming back on. There it comes. Let's see. See if I can get that sized up so you can see it. Everybody see that okay? So I wanted to talk about Noah's ancestors tonight. And if you want to be turning to Genesis chapter 5, and we're going to talk about necessary inference because, and what I'm going to get to here is the age that these men would have been at when the flood came, or, you know, just looking at ages and how those things are determined. And I call it a necessary inference because the Bible doesn't say that this person was this old when the flood came. The only one that it says that of is Noah. He was 600 years old when the flood came. But we can use mathematics and determine the age of the others if they were still alive, or when they died, what year it was in relation to the flood. And so I wanted to kind of go through that with you, kind of as, okay, well, the Bible doesn't specifically say these things, but we can figure that out. So I would call it necessary inference, because we can infer that they were this old or this happened at this time, because the scripture gives us enough information that we can mathematically determine it. Okay, so let's see, I need the pointer here. One on top. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I want to look at Enoch first. If you look in chapter 5, verse 21, it says, and Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. So in this column, it shows the age that these men were when they became a father. Okay, and then if we look at verse 22, it says that and Enoch walked with God 300 years. Let's see. Actually, it was supposed to be 23. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. He didn't really die, but his last day that he breathed upon the earth, he was 365 years. Okay. Then Methuselah was Enoch's son. And so in verse 25, it says Methuselah lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. So he was 187 years old when he became a father. Okay. And then in verse 27, we see, so the days of Methuselah were 969 years old, and he died. And this, by the way, is the oldest man that we have recorded in the Bible, the oldest person that we have recorded. Okay, then we look at Lamech, his son. In verse 28, it says, and Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. Okay, so, and of course, his son was Noah. And so he was 182 years old when he became a father. Okay, and then he was 77 years old, 777 years old. In verse 31, it says, and all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Okay. Okay, so then Noah in verse 30 tells us that Noah, it says Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah. Oh, wait a minute, that's not the right one. Oh, verse 32. I was in a hurry when I did this, and I think I made some mistakes. And Noah was 500 years old and became the father of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Now, I don't know if that means they were triplets. I don't know how 3 sons could be born in 1 year. You know, I don't really understand that verse. I don't think we can make a necessary inference there. He became the father of these 3 at 500. Maybe it just means that the first one that was born, he was 500. We're not really told a good explanation there about what happened. So I don't think we can make a necessary inference that they are triplets. You could make that conclusion, but I don't know that it's necessary. Okay. Chapter 7, verse 6, turn over a page or so, says, now Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth. So that's how I got the 600. So that's the only one that the Bible tells us how old they were. Now, so if you start adding and go back up, you use Noah's 600 years old, and you go back and add how old Lamech was when he had Noah, he would have been 782 years old at the age of the flood, when the flood happened. But he died at 777. So he died several years there before the flood. What is that? 5 years? He died 5 years before the flood. All right. All right. Then if you add to that 782 years, 187 years, Methuselah would have been 969 years old when the flood came. And I've heard people say before that Methuselah died the year of the flood. Now, I don't know if that means he died in the flood or if he died before the flood in the same year. I don't know. I don't think we can make a necessary conclusion from that, but we do know that he did die the year of the flood based on just adding those up. Because there's what we already saw was his age. Okay. Now, I didn't calculate Enoch because he died at an early age, 365 years. He died while still a young man. Isn't that something? So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because I think that that's interesting. Now, if we go the other way, Noah had sons when he was 500 years old, and at 600 years old, the age of was how old he was when the flood came. So his sons were 100 years old. I don't know if that means all of them or just one. The oldest one was 100, but they were 100, or one of them was 100 whenever the flood came. Now, I put this verse under here because if you look at chapter 6, verse 3, turn back to that real quick. And this is when the Lord is looking down upon mankind and seeing how corrupt they are. And it says, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Now, most people interpret this as being that God marked time at that point and said, okay, after 120 years, I'm destroying the earth. Okay. And so sometimes what we say is Noah spent 120 years building the ark. That's what that sentence says. Now, I don't know if we can definitely conclude that, because we don't know how much time went by after God said that before he told Noah to start building the ark. It might have been the same time. It might have been a year or two later. We don't know. But what I find interesting about this is his sons were, or at least one of them was 100 years old when the flood came. If Noah spent 120 years working on it, he spent a lot of years working by himself. He didn't have the help of his sons. They had to get big enough to help him first. So he could have spent 40, 50, 60 years working on this thing by himself without any help. And so I think that gives us even more appreciation about Noah and him obeying what the Lord said by himself, building this huge, huge boat that's longer than a football field. And so I think that helps us understand Noah a little bit more and understand his magnificent faith that he had. So if any of you want a copy of this chart, let me know. I didn't bring one with me, but I can bring it the next time we're here. And so I just thought that was an interesting study. It's something I wanted to dive into. I had looked into this when I was younger, and I don't know what I had done with my notes, so I wanted to look at it again and refresh myself on it. So that's necessary inference, dealing with Noah's ancestors and their ages and how old they would have been during the flood. So what is the importance of that? Well, you know, necessary inference is something that we use all the time in real life. We all use it. And even in law, you've heard about explicit law and implicit law. Okay, the implicit part is the necessary inference or the necessary conclusions that people draw sometimes, and a lot of times that comes down from the judiciary branch of the government as they're looking at the law and interpreting it. And so we use it all the time in real life, and it's necessary to use it also in the Bible. Just like we were talking tonight about the unleavened bread. Why do we know that Jesus would have used unleavened bread? Well, because they were required to use unleavened bread during the Passover, and Jesus did not sin. There you go. There's a necessary inference. Jesus used unleavened bread. And same reason that I think that they would not have had alcoholic wine, because you have a fermentation agent turning that into wine, which could be considered a yeast agent. Again, they would have had grape juice or whatever the fruit of the vine was. We're not sure if it was grape juice. That's what we use. But it most likely was, because they had lots of it in that day and time. So necessary inference. So, this is not really leading us to an invitation or anything, but, we can make all kinds of necessary inference about the importance of obeying the gospel. And why should we obey the gospel? Because if you don't, you're going to be in a bad situation. When the end of time comes or the end of your life comes, we're not going to live as long as these folks did. If we make it to 75 or 80, we'd be doing good. Is what the Bible tells us. And so, we need to always have our lives prepared because, we all want to go to heaven and we don't want to go to the other place. And so, as we think about those things, if there's anything in your life that you need to make correct, why don't you come while we stand and sing?